This is the League of Emergent Architectural Practitioners. We are doing live mentorship sessions here on YouTube so that people can refer back to them or they can join. It's an open invite. I'm going to be hosting these at least a couple times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm going to be on here live and just doing work throughout the evening, so whoever comes on and has any questions will certainly answer them. Otherwise, I'll just be going through some work items and talking through anything that comes up on my mind regarding the architectural practice. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully you find this insightful, inspiring, useful, informational, something of the sort. Thanks for joining. Tonight I am finishing writing some proposals that I didn't finish the other night. So we are working on a proposal for a contractor who needs some renderings. And sending an invoice to a developer for a new project in the North Shore area. Our practice is cordless architecture. We do custom residential homes, unique retail, commercial spaces, and we've got, they're buying up a new house up in Highland Park and hired us to do some design work and permit drawings. So, I also have been experimenting with getting this live stream with some screens and other utilities so that you can see what I'm working on the actual desktop in the live feed. So we're working through some of those technologic hiccups right now, but looking to have those online perhaps next week. So I've got everything on my Google Drive. I've got all my templates for billing and proposals. If you are starting a business or starting to do freelance work or moonlighting, if your company allows it, you'll need something to start with. So it's a good idea to either search online or log into this and ask questions about what should be in a proposal, how to format it, what legal terminology you need to include to protect yourself, scope of work, deadlines, timelines, basically things to protect yourself and the client in terms of the services you're providing and basically what they can expect, because it's all about expectations, managing expectations, good communication between you and the client. So anyway, I'm going to open up billing. And I had started working on this the other day, just putting some pricing together for it. So if you're listening to these concurrently, planning to use AI for these renderings, he's got some simple 2D elevations that he wants rendered up. I did a quick sample for him to see and make sure that his expectations were clear, and they were. It's exactly what he was looking for, so just putting together a proposal now to do 5 more of them, plus printing and things like that. So I've got this here. just writing a message in the chat here. For anyone that's there, if you've got any questions about architecture or anything, welcome to Leap Live Mentorship Sessions. So this channel started as an exploration channel for architecture, new technologies, specifically when AI was hitting big 2 years ago now, a couple summers ago. I was invited early to test Midjourney, DALL-E, a couple other programs, and we did some explorations to see how we can use those programs to start to design buildings or just integrate the tool into an architectural design workflow, and interest in that has blossomed. And specifically on LinkedIn, I've gained a big community of people that I follow, that follow me, to see their work, and it's impressive. A lot of people are continuing to do design work in Midjourney and now expand into Stable Diffusion using ControlNet and things of that nature. But the workflows are becoming pretty impressive and more realistic in terms of being able to design with the tools. So this is sort of an extension of that in terms of utilizing or researching new technologies and workflows in architecture that can be really used in the profession in actual practice, rather than simply being locked into academia or social media. So we're trying to gather a community of like-minded architects and designers to join this forum. So welcome to Leap Live Mentorship Sessions. I'll just leave that there, and anyone who's interested to start discussions, I'll be here, just doing work. So hey, let me know if you have any questions. We're just doing some work here tonight. Info. Okay, so we've got renderings, amount per rendering, prints, we've got an overhead and management fee. So that's fine. Proposals and contracts. An invoice. Just make a simple invoice for it. Don't need a whole proposal. Copy, duplicate. So it's nice having everything on the Google Drive and be able to just duplicate a proposal or an invoice and basically type in a couple pieces of specific information, project number, name, client's address, things like that, and shoot it off to them. So I've got a whole system for how I keep project numbers, basically the year and then the project number. And that's how every project is stored, by email, by invoice, by documentation. So I'm just going to take this number and put it in. Nice. So we sent out invites today on LinkedIn to just gather a collection of people, of some of our colleagues, and it's looking like we're gaining some momentum here. But LinkedIn really does not like when you link and reference outside of LinkedIn. They want to keep you in LinkedIn as much as you can. Because I've noticed whenever I give them what they want, which is basically like a GIF of something exciting made by AI or something and writing in the format that they want, post will usually do pretty good. But if you're ever trying to self-promote, especially with a link that guides people outside of LinkedIn, it does not perform too well. So I posted a link to this live session there and sent emails out. So we'll see, we'll be doing this a couple times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we'll see if there's any interest in it. I guess that's how I can break it up. Insert. What is this? Insert row below. Okay, that's good. We'll do 600s. It's nice to break things out in line items on your invoices and proposals. I think it always just helps justify the work a little bit, especially when the scope is small enough. I mean, I think lump sums are great for large projects. You shouldn't have to justify your services that much, but how's it going? Any questions about architecture? So when the scope is not large enough, it's not really worth putting together an entire proposal. I'll just put a disclaimer in here that states, these renderings are for reference only, and it's to the contractor's or home builder's discretion to coordinate with the architect of record for colors, materials, things of that nature. Final selection. So insert row below. Right. see how this works. We're going to be posting basically Tuesdays and Thursday nights. Link to the live session, but I wonder if that's going to update the title. That's okay. Hey, how's it going? Leap live mentorship session is currently streaming. It's got the number on there. Okay, I don't know. Let's see how that goes. All right. Anyway, where were we? Let's finish this out. Invoice 1, project number. And I've got the client's name. We always tack on an overhead and project management fee. You know, there's things like keeping the lights on, internet, all these things that accumulate that are important to capture. And if you have done your taxes, you go through, you understand what your overhead is, it becomes easier to kind of break out that number and assign a certain percentage, either fixed to each project. Hey, how's it going? We're doing live mentorship sessions. Ask any questions about architecture. All right, we'll get the total in there, justified everything, itemize the client's name, go back to my contact book. It's under my proposed projects yet because they haven't signed a contract. And we'll get his name, phone number, email address, copy paste. Okay, great. I don't think I need this payment schedule for this. Issue date 6/20. Project number, paste it all over the place. So we're going to be billing the village. So if we don't like these vertical streams, we might switch to horizontal, but I want to see if I can get that vertical orientation to work. Pretty much have this ready to go. Just start this email here. Usually the subject of the emails, I like to also put the project number, but sometimes I put the address. I think for this one I'm going to use project number. Hey, what's going on? I've got some work to do before I can get these out, but I think Tuesday afternoon, you could say. Tuesday afternoon. Should have them ready. Should have everything ready for you to pick up by, let's give ourselves an extra day. Wednesday morning. Which is, always put the dates. 6/9/6/26. So yesterday we had, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, we had someone on who was asking some interesting questions about AI specifically and architecture and how the profession may be changing with that. And we started talking about a pretty interesting workflow that actually involved homeowners or renters being part of the design process in terms of using their phones to scan the space and using that scan to create a design, either through Matterport, or I know iPhone has a new app that's coming out that's going to be able to scan really well using LiDAR. And before long, anybody will be able to put together like 3D models basically of their existing space, which is pretty interesting because right now part of our services at the front end include going to an existing building and surveying it. That's how you start the process. But now with the LiDAR technology, a lot of people are actually going and getting these scans done by realtor companies, and the developers will have 2D plans, schematic plans, 3D walkthroughs, photos, and in some cases, like the actual LiDAR model that you can reference, you can measure from. So the last project I did, full home remodel and exterior refinishing, the developer had a LiDAR model from their realtor, and I used that. I put some disclaimers saying that, if we're not dimensioning everything in terms of a survey, we're not liable for, key or critical dimensions, and there were no like critical structural dimensions. This is like all finishes essentially. So the model was accurate enough in terms of putting together a set of plans for permitting for basically just refinishing some things within the home. But on bigger projects, it's critical. I mean, as the architect, you become liable for making sure the dimensions are accurate, but it doesn't hurt to have that LiDAR model as a starting point. And I know that Matterport has an option to convert their model into 3D. I think it's why don't I think it's an OBJ file? Maybe it's an OBJ or something that is compatible with Revit. And I think they even have like levels of detail that you can develop the model to or from, in terms of like breaking the walls out separate from the doors and the windows and things of that nature. So they have a service in their app, like on their website, where you can take your scan, ask them to produce a model for you, and they return it. I haven't done it yet because it's a paid subscription that you need to have in order to utilize those services, but it's looking pretty enticing. So I'm thinking about experimenting with it. But the point was, any homeowner is going to have the ability to do these scans and essentially produce a set of plans with a scanned model, and using AI will quickly be able to create a floor plan from this model. And in the discussion we had the other day, we came to sort of an interesting thought process in terms of if you are doing LiDAR scanning, will you be able to actually detect the way that the building was put together in terms of load-bearing walls, and can AI call out which walls are load-bearing, provide a detail to you to say, this is a load-bearing wall, it can be removed, but it needs to be replaced with this LVL member, this length. Here's the detail for it. You can tell your contractor about it and get a price for it. Do you want us to connect you to a contractor? Can we connect you to an architect who can verify that this information is accurate? So I think that's coming down the line pretty quickly. So keep in mind, I was someone that was very interested in design. It defined me, especially through my academic career and my young professional career too. I mean, I was chasing, being the design director of every company I was at, and it was fulfilling for the time until I realized that a lot of design is extremely subjective. And it started to feel like these designs were just not really contributing anything in terms of value. So I started to look at the profession more as, we are legally bound with a lot of governmental requirements in terms of licensing, and this is similar to law or the medical field in terms of being required to have documentation for being married, or any number of things. And likewise, medical, kids needing certain vaccinations in order to go to a public school system. And architecture, it's not too dissimilar. I think where it has gotten diluted is it being tied into and connected with design, particularly interior design. But the same style of interior design is starting to be implemented, or not style, I guess the same mentality of interior design is starting to infiltrate exterior architecture, in that it's very fashionable, it's very trendy, it's very product oriented, and I don't think this is the architecture that any of us really signed up for. I think that, at least when I started school, I would look at buildings as these holistic, cohesive projects, entities that required, I think, more mindful and thoughtful design processes in order to make sure there was some integrity throughout the entire construction and design. A lot of it's like materials. I think traditional buildings being built with brick, stone, concrete block, but even plaster and concrete block. Like we see, the basic building materials, they're not too much different like all over the world, from in terms of building with stone and then slathering it basically with mud. So when you really look at like the universals, you're like boiling it back down to a very few simple building materials and elements that obviously have evolved over the years. You have steel, now you have wood framed structures. These are very interesting, but when you're building a structure either out of steel or wood framed or mud, when you're cladding it in a product, it makes it's a facade. That's why they call it a facade. But it just feels like architecture is becoming way too facade oriented. You literally have facade engineers, facade designers, facade consultants. I worked at a high-rise residential firm here in the city of Chicago, and they didn't even have in-house architects that could handle the management of the facade systems. They had consultants that were, they're specifically tasked with designing the facade and documenting it and making sure that it was wind resistant and water resistant and all these things, because especially for high-rise buildings, there's a lot more requirements. Actually, Stuart Hicks just did a pretty interesting YouTube video on that. If you guys are familiar with him, he went to UIC and he started a YouTube channel. He's got some pretty interesting topics that he discusses on there. But the point I was trying to make is the profession is being delegated out to like so many different consultants and parties that the master builder that once was, who was, in charge or responsible for creating the cohesive whole and having a vision to build the building, has become diluted. And, there is still the architect who's responsible for managing most of the people, but even then there's, managing architects, there's design architects who are responsible for the design and the design content versus the design and or documentation and permit drawings. So the process, I think, I'd be really curious to know what the general public thinks of. And I had this conversation with a few of my friends a long time ago, or 15 years ago, I think. But the question that I had brought up to them was, what do you think the general public thinks architects do? And we all kind of reverted back to what we thought architects did when we were younger, which was you draw a building and it gets built somehow. Um, or we are technical drawers that do drawings for permitting, and that's true, but there's also like 150 steps in between from designing site designing the survey, existing conditions, doing zoning analysis, doing pro forma to see if the project is even feasible in terms of construction costs or real estate. But if you're building for a client who does know all that already, after that process, that's like pre-design, you move into the design phase. And then typically you have a team of designers, a design lead, and then multiple sub-designers or designers that are just below them in terms of the hierarchy. And they're spitting out concepts to see, basically throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, what the client's going to be interested in. Or maybe the client typically goes to a certain architecture firm for their style, and that's very popular obviously with Zaha Hadid, but also at certain high-rise residential firms or industrial manufacturing firms. You go to those people because they have done that type of work. And you can either start with those kind of benchmark designs as a designer, or you can try and push the boundaries, but typically if the client knows what they came to you for, you're going to be delivering them exactly that. And the design phase in itself, you might be dealing with the municipality who will have a bunch of requirements in terms of building height and all the zoning requirements, but there's a lot of other dimensions to it during that stage as well. You could be getting TIF funding from the government or public funding, so that you have to go to public meetings and the public can vote on your design basically. I've been involved or included with like all of these steps, and that is to say, like it's a very long process to even get to like a point where you have a design that you can start to disassemble in terms of putting a drawing set together. What is it made of then? Like, what is the structure? Are you doing it out of concrete, CMU block, steel? Is it wood frame, timber? Is really popular, gaining popularity now for like these timber high rises you might be seeing or hearing about in the future. There's going to be 3D printed construction, but at that point you're working with a structural engineer, and you're coming up with like the most cost-effective method to build the structure for the client. And that's a whole process on its own. If your company doesn't have structural engineers in-house, then you're hiring people. Concurrently, while that's happening, the designers are looking up materials that the building is going to be clad with, essentially. And I mean, that is where the project begins to split in terms of true responsibilities and management of separate teams. Now, with a lot of larger projects, architects use 3D software to put buildings together. It's called BIM, Building Information Modeling. So you may have heard of Revit. Revit is like the next evolution in terms of CAD, computer-aided design. So you're probably familiar with AutoCAD, which came out, I think I just read recently, 1982 or 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there, a long time ago. And that was a huge shift in terms of getting things off of paper, where architects and engineers were literally drafting on paper, which is amazing. I've got some pretty cool tools from my wife's grandfather, who had an engineering firm. These amazing hand tools that they would have to use. It's incredible. But so there was a huge shift from hand drawing to computer-aided design. And then now, I mean, I think people would still argue that like we're in the transition and shift from 2D to 3D. I've worked at companies that were still completely 2D, and I have tried to convert them into 3D from their 2D AutoCAD, and it's tough. Once you start a company and you've built an entire framework on a certain workflow, it's difficult to train everybody to transition to a different workflow. But we are now, the architectural profession, primarily for larger projects, especially using 3D, and what I was mentioning before, it's like that's the bifurcation point, multiple bifurcation points, where you have a structural model, electrical, mechanical, plumbing model. All of these are separate models that get loaded and linked into one, master model. And the architect does, I shouldn't even say that. Typically, they're responsible for coordinating all these different disciplines, and then consultants, if you had fire suppression or IT, and then on top of that, design work, from design-oriented firms for interiors. You can end up with 5, 6, 7, 8 models that you're responsible for coordinating. And because it's become so much in the 3D model, especially, now there is a separate job for that. And it's called, I think it's called like a virtual design coordinator. There's a lot of different terms for it. BIM coordinator. They'll run clash detection on models to make sure that ductwork isn't colliding with structural members, plumbing, piping work. All of these things are designed so that when you are actually building it in the field, you are not running into these kind of collisions and mistakes in the field. You've worked all these things out virtually in the model beforehand. And that's an interesting shift alone, in terms of like more responsibility being on the architects to truly have like a virtual build of a model before it goes into construction. Because previously, especially when things were hand-drawn or in 2D, CAD drawings, a lot of lines were very representational. Not the structure or architectural necessarily, but certainly electrical. If you've seen like electrical plans, or maybe you're familiar with, it's a reflected ceiling plan. You see where the light locations are, you see where the switch is, and there's just kind of a loopy dashed line connecting the switch to the light. And that's great. Actually now, that's still how I do some of my drawings for the custom high-end residential work, because it affords the trades, the electricians, plumbers, mechanical, HVAC installers, to work at their will and navigate things as they need to and kind of coordinate those things in the field. It just works. Things come up, collisions come up, issues come up, and on the back end, that's what architects traditionally were there for, in terms of what's called construction administration. And you'd be there to answer those questions, or go to the site and meet with all the different trades and say, well, your duct work is coming right through my hallway here. I wanted the ceilings to be lofted. What do we have to do? Get the framers back in. We got to lower the ceiling. It's a very detailed description because that's something that just happened on one of our projects. But the project moving into sort of a coordination and engineering and design phase is where it just like explodes into all these different disciplines. And the architect, like I was mentioning before, has become diluted in terms of even being responsible for coordinating between a lot of the disciplines. So now, there is still some responsibility for that, but what I sensed before I left sort of the corporate field was a transition of architects becoming product sourcers, specifiers. That's another job that architects have, is writing specifications for large projects, which is often quoted as like the other half of the drawings. The drawings are not really representational. I say now that it's presentational because it's 3D and you're building it in virtual reality essentially. But the specifications are there to capture any notes or manufacturer's requirements that the architect may miss. So if there's a metal panel or a curtain wall system, whatever, be it a finished material or a specification for the quality of concrete work, polished concrete or tile work, you're always able to point to and lean on the product or the product manufacturer's specifications for that product, either in terms of the installation, because they will have installation recommendations, you know, how to prep before installing, product storage before it's installed, maintaining the product after it's installed so that you don't void warranties, things like that. And so, I mean, again, this is one of these things that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, but on much larger projects or very expensive home builds, you will have actually like a book of specifications that acts as like a guidebook for the contractor to refer to, and is typically put together and handed over to the homeowner after construction is complete, so that they can reference what materials they have on or in their project, how to maintain them, and if anything goes wrong, you know, what to replace it with. So it becomes like a catalog for their building. So anyway, that's another job that architects are responsible for, is like a product specification. And it was just, to me, when I was in the corporate environment, feeling like we were just picking different products to be slapped on our buildings. I mean, if you really look at like metal panels, for instance, Kingspan, Centria, they have amazing books of details and catalogs for all their building systems. And they offer insulated metal panels, skins, like just single skin metal panels, which can be applied as like a rain screen or just a cladding. They've got integrated window wall systems, integrated like coping caps, like base pieces, starter pieces, corner pieces. They basically have like entire Lego kits that you can build your building with. So from that point, it's like, where do we draw the line in terms of manufacturers being the architect and the architect just being a product specifier of these materials that are like handling all the coordination? And if you were specifying two separate products, a metal panel and a curtain wall system, typically the architect would be responsible for calling out what the detail would be between the intersection of those two things. I mean, if they're taught anything in school, in the academic setting, like architecture is essentially about composition and dealing with the intersection of materials. And now even that is being outsourced to the product manufacturers. You will have companies dictating, you know, what and how a flashing should work between two dissimilar pieces. And, you know, these things are supposed to be common knowledge for architects that are in the field, young professionals, and should be being taught to academic students. But part of the reason why I'm starting this league of emergent architectural practitioners is for, you know, seasoned veterans to get on the line with young architects who need assistance to learn some of these things, to kind of pull the dial back in terms of taking more responsibility for putting buildings together, not leaning so heavily on the product manufacturers to design products to build our buildings for us. And the reason for that is I believe that there's going to be a huge shift in terms of how buildings are put together with 3D printing and AI. It's like, in my mind, very realistic in terms of printing parts of buildings that are being assembled, and then the architect literally becomes responsible for designing those pieces designing the intersections, designing how the building goes together, what it looks like. And again, in my mind, it starts to become the kind of monolithic or cohesive like architectural project that I think a lot of people imagined architecture should be, instead of this kind of piecemealed, outsourced, diluted process. So we were at the point of the process of talking about the project being split into all these pieces, and the architect sort of being responsible for, like, you know, herding the cats and pulling everything together into a cohesive project. And that's a long phase, and it's a huge part of the architectural process. That's why, you know, typically they'll say, like, you'll cartoon out a drawing set just to make sure that all the parts and pieces are there, your overall plans, your call out for enlarged plans, floor plans. Same thing for elevations, low, long elevations, tall elevations, kind of at a smaller scale, and then doing your call out and zooming in and looking at them in more detail and calling out materials, calling out specific dimensions. After you've sort of cartooned out how the set is going to be put together, there's weeks and months of like hashing out the details and really figuring out how the building is going together. Which is amazing that, like, we're here at this point in 2020 and we're still like custom designing buildings the way we are. I think that's why a lot of people are okay with like outsourcing a lot of the work to consultants or product manufacturers. But anyway, after the details are sorted out, then you enter, I mean, you have to go through many review processes with that. And then you go into permitting. Few rounds of permitting. It's typically never approved on the first try unless it's a simple, you know, addition or interior remodel. But if you're doing massive buildings at like governmental scale, then you're always going to have comments, which is good. You have people in the cities that are reviewing it, but even the cities now outsource their reviews. So third-party reviewers to do permitting. So then you can hire permit consultants and expediters. So this is all to say that the process is like extremely convoluted, and there's a lot of opportunities for mistakes and issues to occur. And I think people think that the process is a lot simpler than it is, and it's not. But you know, after permitting, assuming it does get permitted, goes through, that's when you have construction administration, where architects are, you know, typically requested and serviced to be on site to do weekly or every 2-week visits and take photos and have weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the contractor and the building owner or the developer to make sure that construction is on schedule, on budget, being built according to the plans, the permit documents. And it's a long process with a lot of information, a lot of different steps that I think, again, the whole reason why we're starting this mentorship program is to kind of walk through each of those steps, just at a high level, kind of general overview level, and work deeper down into each of those levels as we kind of gain more subscribers and more interest. We can kind of navigate those avenues as we wish, but at the same time question them and see if there are better ways to do it. So that's going to be it for this session. We didn't really have any questions. No subscribers or guests pop on here today, so that's okay. That's why we're doing this. It's always going to be available for an hour, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, it's not just making our way through like the current field condition of architecture, but it's questioning and moving forward. So if you have any questions that are specifically geared towards advancing the profession in terms of implementing new technologies, or really testing, the way that workflows work now to see if they can be more efficient, then I would be happy to answer those questions. But for now, we will be signing off. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time on the League of Emergent Architectural Practitioners.